How long, O Lord, will you neglect me? Asks the soul. The stanza of the chorale by Paul Speditus that ends this part of the cantata responds, although he appears that he does not will it, do not be afraid, for when he is most with you, he does not reveal it. Let his word be sure to you, and although your heart says only no, do not let yourself despair. The second part of the cantata introduces a growing element of hope. We'll hear a bass recitative, followed by a soprano aria, a recitative for the alto, and a lovely duet for soprano and aria before the concluding chorale. The world is a vast wilderness. Heaven becomes bronze, earth iron. program, Bach Cantata of the Week. Thanks for listening with me, Tiffany. Have a blessed week. And join me again next time as we continue to explore Bach's body of sacred cantatas. Visit DZFE online at dzfe.febc.ph.
According to the New Testament, the kingdom of God is something that you should seek before all other things. It's something you can enter or go into, and immediately is something that can be taken away. The kingdom of God is something that Jesus says is at hand or has come near. He also describes it as a secret that must be given to us by God. It's something that can belong to you or be received. It is found in religion, and it is also evangelism. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and the prophets are countless beings from all over the world. So they were listening to fundamentals of the faith, fundamentals of feminism, and yet speak more ironic and nonsense and approach. Anyway, the kingdom of God American influence upon the whole point of fundamentalism and the religious culture. It has, by and large, pulled many evangelicals away from historic evangelicalism. Which is what our religious pretense, which is the style, the Jewish style of is really understood to marry to race or Thank you.
This is different from salvation by word.
And the answer is not a hair's breadth. So, from his own lips, there is this kind of not ambiguity, contradiction. In today's situation, when is a paradise case, what do you believe John answer everything? That's part of the problem of evangelicalism today. It's everything.
And just likes whatever believes, looks for the positive in everything, which isn't all bad, but it doesn't draw together any kind of coherence to theology.
Your email is 95% full, and you're about to make the wrong decision.
You don't need to delete all your spam emails manually anymore.
Theological
All you have to do is go to the App Store, search for and download AI Cleaner. Open it.
Good, and this is one of my own feelings about 18th century evangelicalism, that if you understand the dynamic of Christian life as conversion over against formalism, you run inevitably in a moralistic direction, because in 17th century theology, conversion always is an element of sanctification. And therefore, if the very heart of Christian experience becomes conversion, and you're not very, very clear-minded about what you mean by that, which Wesley wasn't, you really are making a sanctification category the essential and central religious category.
And don't you think that's true in evangelicalism today?
Yes, absolutely.
It's true by the number of calls and letters we get from people who are, now wait a minute, I've heard you talk about justification, but where does sanctification fit in all that? I mean, that's the first question that arises.
And the Christian life, there's always a question about the centrality of the Christian life. One of the things people often say when they sort of discover Reformation theology is I would have said I was a Christ-centered person. But now, goodness gracious, Christ is at the center of everything. And that isn't often the case, sadly, because of our preaching. But it's because they picked up a book written by somebody 200, 300, 400 years ago.
Who did say it clearly.
Who did say it clearly. Let's move then after the time of Wesley. Let's move to the Great Awakening, and that was formative on both sides of the Atlantic. The Evangelical Revival in England and the Great Awakening in America involved a lot of the same, or some of the same people. Why was the Great Awakening necessary in the view of people like Jonathan Edwards and George Whitefield?
Well, again, the context was primarily one of formalism. There were lots of people who had been raised in the church, faithfully attended the church, but there was a deep-seated suspicion in the minds of many of the ministers and others that these people were not genuinely converted. And there was this great longing then and expectation of the need for revival, for awakening, for a sovereign work of the Spirit to bring new enthusiasm, new health, new life to the churches of New England and the Mid-Atlantic colonies as well. So there was a great growing desire and expectation that that's what was needed to renew the Puritan experiment of a Bible commonwealth, of a holy city of light set on a hill.
Would you say that just as in the Evangelical Revival, Arminian and Calvinistic notions tended to get blurred and actually toned down so that there could be some sort of a focus, a common focus on the evangelical spirituality rather than on evangelical doctrinal distinctives? That the same thing happened in the Great Awakening, especially as it begins to tumble into the Second Great Awakening.
Yeah, I think the Great Awakening itself in America was solidly dominated by Calvinists, so that the central theology remained an Orthodox Calvinist theology. It seems to me that the strain the Great Awakening puts on Calvinist church life, as it had been known in the 16th, 17th, early 18th century, was that this new experience of God's powerful presence as they felt it in the Great Awakening led some of the leaders of the Awakening to say to lay people need to be in congregations where the power is present and felt, and it shifted the whole character of church life from being very much minister-centered, parish-centered, to increasingly the lay-centered, where they get up on the road and called the triumphant. And one of the messages that came through was, you should go church shopping. We ought to find out where the spiritual power is. This has been something almost unknown in Christendom until this point. Neighborhood parish church. And was that because it was such a tendency to separate the word and the spirit, so that there was this belief that excitement is what we're looking for, not necessarily just the sound population of the word. Well, I think in the Great Awakening, what we're really looking for is a life and faithful proclamation of the word. But once we have taken that dramatic step of saying it's up to the lady to determine who's the faithful preacher, before that it would largely assume that the preachers knew who were the faithful preachers, and this was a responsibility of officers of the church. But once you say, well, the lady knows it's up to you, then you run that risk of saying to people, you have within you all that you need to be singing where you are and where you're not. Right. Go there where you are.
Why is it evangelical? And why is it that this movement that has so powerfully shaped this continent in the last 2 centuries has now for the first time losing converts to Roman Catholicism, Eastern Orthodoxy, and now to, ironically, the churches and the heritage that gave birth really to evangelicalism in the first place. Evangelical comes right out of the Reformation. Luther and the Lutherans call themselves evangelicals. Reformed Christians call themselves evangelicals. The question is, at what point does evangelicalism become something else? And at what point does it broaden to the point where it no longer means anything? That issue of how broad can that term become before it is meaningless is something a lot of people are asking today. But wasn't that a question that people were asking a long time ago, especially with the involvement of Wesleyans and later Pentecostals? How broad can this thing get?
Well, in the original days of Christianity today, that volume 1, number 1, that was a question. You would read a major article by Jeffrey Bromley, Reformed Anglican author and co-translator of Bart's Church Dogmatics. You would read a major article by Bromley. 2 pages later, there would be a major book review by a professor at Asbury Seminary in Kentucky. And so from the very beginning, the question was, just how broad is this thing? And the answer that was given was on purpose sort of a non-answer. We were cooperating, we were coming out of a deep anti-intellectualism. We are going to get out of it. We're going to have professors for the first time with real degrees that we didn't give from our little institutions. Fuller Seminary is proof of that, but don't ask too many questions.
And there's an irony about that, because the explosion in the 1920s of American Protestantism into liberal and fundamentalist wings occurred because both parties had called themselves evangelical.
Oh, really?
So that in the 20s, when Dr. Machen wrote his book on Christianity and liberalism, the liberals howled because they insisted they were evangelical Christians every bit as much as the fundamentalists were. And that's why the new terminology had to be used. So already in the late 19th century, the issue was beginning to be clear. How wide can this term evangelical be stretched? How liberal can you become still be considered evangelical?
Well, so we have that question raised in connection with Wesley, compromising with both the material and formal principles of the Reformation by confusion, but also explicitly, for instance, sola scriptura, that got rid of sola scriptura, scripture alone, and then it's confused on justification.
And so you see, I think already in the 19th century evangelicalism, something of a minimalist mindset is setting in. What's the least that you have to believe?
A born-again experience.
And a born-again experience, some recognition of biblical authority, some general sense of being a Protestant in terms of talking about faith and grace without a whole lot of specificity often. That becomes kind of the rock core